These conspiracy theories are going to ruin your childhood. I love these types of videos. I love being really nostalgic. Like sometimes I actually crash out at the thought that I can never experience like 2007 again. It makes me really sad, you know? But nonetheless, I love taking our favorite childhood TV shows and movies and just absolutely ruining them. All right, the first theory comes from a classic Nickelodeon show, Ned's Declassified. So this was one of my favorite shows as a kid. I always thought it was hilarious, but this theory actually makes a lot of sense. So what if I told you that Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide wasn't just a quirky kid show, but actually the chaotic mental unraveling of a boy? What if the entire show is a visual representation of a breakdown in progress and the tips were really just coping mechanisms for someone who's trapped in their own mind? This is one of the most mind-bending, childhood ruining conspiracy theories because the idea is that Ned's Declassified was never a guide, it was actually a cry for help. So the theory is that Ned is actually in a psychiatric hospital and he's inventing a school and classmates all in his head to process trauma. There's a lot of surreal stuff that actually happens in Ned's Declassified. Like there's literally an episode where they're trying to escape a locker that eats people. Like the things that happen in the show are not realistic by any means, which is funny because I feel like it is supposed to be kind of a realistic idea of what middle school is supposed to be like. But there's a lot of interesting things here. Like the teachers literally feel like caricatures. They don't really educate. They kind of intimidate the students, ignore them, or just confuse them in general. The entire school dynamic just feels like it was designed by someone who doesn't remember what it was like to be in school, but only remembers how it felt emotionally, like frightening, nonsensical, overstimulating, and kind of like a dream, which is more a nightmare, and that's kind of how we see the middle school being portrayed in the show. There's a lot of like dream-like hallucinations and sequences in the show that don't really make sense, and you could just say it's for fun and it's just a kid's show, but it does make it a little bit darker when you think of it in this way. People think that Ned's best friend Cookie represents the fragment of Ned's mind that deals with logic, because as we see Cookie progress, he starts off as a very like nerdy character. He like is really smart, he knows everything, and then as the show continues, he becomes kind of like a cyborg. Like he wears headgear that scans people's faces, he has a visor that tracks data, his glasses shoot lasers, the whole 9 yards. He even gets to a point where he like malfunctions when he's stressed, which basically is representing that the worse Ned's mental state gets, so does Cookie by glitching and falling apart. A lot of people think that Mose is actually a nurse or a memory. I kind of think it makes sense for her to be a nurse because Mose was always just like older than them. Like she wasn't actually older than them, but she was older, you know? Like her personality was aged a lot. It gets kind of creepy because if you think about it, she often knows what Ned is always about to say. She knows what he's thinking. She appears to save him from spiraling in several episodes. And when Ned gets in trouble or confused, like Mose is the stabilizer. She is a symbol of emotional grounding and stability. One of the biggest indicators that this theory is true is the survival tips themselves, because if you think about it, they sound helpful on the surface, but when you go back and watch them, they're really not. They're just like band-aids. They're clearly coping strategies to deal with problems instead of addressing them. Like when you're being bullied, just hide in your locker. If you fail a test, fake sick. When your crush ignores you, make a chart to monitor her schedule. Like it goes on and on. I also feel like there's a lot of hidden symbolism in the show itself. There's like a very exaggerated colors, fisheye lens shots. It kind of mimics like the feeling of being really overstimulated or anxiety. And honestly, maybe the theory should be that Ned's not in a mental institution. He's just a kid going through middle school through the lens of someone who has like extreme anxiety, which kind of actually makes a little bit more sense now that I think about it. But I think either theory could be true, and both are interesting. Let me know what you think. All right, the next theory is absolutely childhood ruining because it is true. This is canon. This was supposed to happen to Hannah Montana, and I will never be thankful enough that they didn't do this, because if they did, I would have been so pissed. I was a huge Miley stan. I loved Hannah Montana, and I can't even imagine the crash out I would have had if this was the ending. But this was filmed. There was an alternate ending of Hannah Montana that was filmed. There's real footage of it. At the end of Hannah Montana, she basically wakes up and is in her childhood bedroom and is a child, and her dad, Billy Ray Cyrus, and her mom, Tish Cyrus, like genuinely her actual parents, Miley Cyrus, not Miley Stewart, come in, and Miley's just like, I'm gonna be a pop star someday, and all of it was just a dream in her head. They were going to ruin Hannah Montana forever. What do you mean by that?
I'm gonna miss you so much.
I'm a rockin' rock star, yes I are. Miley Cyrus is a rockin' rock star. Gonna go real far, 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 far.
Miley Cyrus, why are you still up? You know it's past your bedtime.
And you've got school in the morning.
Mom, it's not my fault. My audience paid good money to see me, and I couldn't go to bed without doing an encore.
One encore?
3.
Oh, you are so just like your daddy. Come on now, let's get you into bed or you're gonna be too tired for your show tomorrow night.
And for school. Someone's got to be appearing around here.
Come on, you heard the boss.
I really am gonna be rock star someday. Just like Daddy.
That doesn't surprise me a bit. As long as you keep believing in yourself, you can do anything you want to do.
Your mama's right. And if I know my little girl, someday your dream's gonna come true.
What? I cannot believe that they filmed this shit, you know? Something about that makes me genuinely feel like sad and nostalgic in a way that I can't describe. Like, I don't know, like we hear so many different childhood ruining conspiracy theories. It's like, oh, it was all in their head. They're in a coma. They're in a dream, like whatever. That's a classic theory. The fact that Disney was actually going to go that route to the point where they filmed this alternate ending is nuts. That's nuts. Imagine all of Hannah Montana just in her head. I mean, it makes kind of sense because how the fuck did people not know that was Hannah Montana? It was a wig. She had the same face. All right, the next conspiracy theory is kind of wild. I cannot believe that this is a theory, but I saw this on TikTok a lot, and it's a theory that Dora the Explorer is actually blind. So I think the reason that people believe this theory is because Dora is constantly asking you where things are even when they're right in front of her. She just pauses and waits and stares at you, and it's always up to you to help her find what she's looking for. But what if that's not just like a quirky interactive element, but what if Dora is actually blind? The idea is that Dora the Explorer isn't just an animated adventurer, but a visually impaired child navigating the world in an entirely different way than we thought. People think Boots, her monkey, is actually a support dog, but monkey, and he's trained to help her be her seeing eye monkey. Also, her map and her backpack talk. And the theory is that that's not actually just like magic or just because it's a kid show, but it's because she has to learn to live her life without vision, so she relies on her hearing. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. I kind of don't believe it just because I think the point of her repeating things is to get kids to interact, but who knows? All right, the next theory comes from High School Musical, which I know is a favorite of a lot of people. I'm like not the biggest High School Musical girl. I can't lie. But there is a really popular theory that I actually think makes it kind of interesting, which is that High School Musical, all of it takes place in detention. Like, think Breakfast Club vibes. The idea is that the singing, the romance, and the rebellion is all just a shared hallucination among a bunch of bored kids who had to stay after school. And the theory is that the entire plot of High School Musical, or at least the majority of it, occurs just in one afternoon in detention. And maybe this is even just in one of their heads. Honestly, I feel like Sharpay would make the most sense. She's daydreaming this like High School Musical fantasy and where she has struggles and plot twists and all of that. I just feel like that's so Sharpay, you know? It's just so theatrical and over the top. Everyone's screaming, standing on tables, dancing, all of that jazz. It kind of makes sense for it to be all in a character's head that's just sitting in detention bored. I used to do this. I didn't get detention. When I was in class in elementary school, I remember I used to just like close my eyes and watch the movie Hairspray in my head. So Is it that far off? I feel like Sharpay would be the perfect person for this to be about, because a lot of the story points revolve around her. I feel like she literally is the main character. Obviously, like Troy and Gabriella are like posed as the main character, but if you think about it, all of the challenges that Sharpay faces is what's making her level up as a person. So she's put these challenges in her own little fantasy world to challenge herself and to create a great story. And I think this is true. Honestly, the theory is that it's a shared experience within like all of these kids' detention, like the Breakfast Club, but I actually think it makes more sense to just be Sharpay. But let me know what you guys think. All right, the next theory comes from That's So Raven, which by far best Disney Channel show ever. Like literally ever. And there is a dark theory that Raven Baxter was actually just an MK Ultra test subject. And I think this makes a lot of sense considering it's Disney. Let's not forget. So first, let's talk MK Ultra. MK Ultra was basically a covert CIA program that ran from the 1950s to the 1970s. This actually happened. And the goal was to develop different methods of mind control, psychological torture, and behavioral modification. Experiments were conducted on unwilling American citizens, including children, prisoners, psychiatric patients, and some of the tactics included LSD dosing, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, and electric shock. And while it's technically been officially shut down, a lot of people think that it still exists to this day, and I think that's, you know, probably true. But a lot of people also think they experimented with like psychics, and specifically children psychics. The show Stranger Things is based off of the Montauk Project, which is a subset of MK Ultra, which was basically government testing on people who had these supernatural abilities. So when you watch That's So Raven from a MK Ultra lens, it kind of gets way darker. For one, Raven's psychicness is such a big secret for no reason. Like if you think about it, I don't know why it was always such a secret. Like, why couldn't everyone know that she was a psychic, you know? I feel like it could have helped people. She was having real visions and they were happening real time. But she always acted like it had to be such a secret. And that's because the government conditioned her to be this way. The theory goes that she was a product of secret experiments as a child, and her visions are symptoms, not a gift. If you think about it, Raven's not like a classic psychic character, or even like a psychic that say they exist in this world today. She can't summon any visions. She doesn't know how to stop them. And oftentimes she doesn't really understand what's happening. And it feels like she's like just a passenger along the ride and her visions are what's controlling her. I also think it's interesting to note that Raven's visions are always like misunderstood or misinterpreted because her visions are predicting the future. And when she goes to try to prevent those visions from happening, that's what makes the visions happen, if that makes sense. It just doesn't work the way a normal psychic works. I do think that the series is interesting that it could be a product of government control. And again, there's actual historical precedent for the government training psychics. Like this is a real thing that happened. There was Project Stargate, which basically investigated the use of psychic ability and basically used gifted individuals to gather intel. This ran from the 1970s until it was declassified in 1995. So this makes the idea of Raven's powers being induced or monitored way more plausible than you'd think. And again, if you think about it, Raven was never predicting the future, she was creating it through her visions. She was seeing her visions, trying to prevent them, and that was creating the outcome. So I do think that this is an interesting theory overall, and connecting it to Stranger Things and the Montauk Project, I don't know. I kind of believe it, and especially since it's Disney, a lot of people think Disney was involved with MK Ultra, and honestly, it kind of makes sense, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. All right, the last theory that we're going to be talking about comes from Lilo and Stitch, and the theory is that Stitch is actually just Lilo's imaginary friend, and everything is inside of her head. This makes the most sense when it comes to this show if you want to make any logical sense of a show like this. Obviously, the idea of aliens and coming to Earth and the CIA being involved, it's not like unheard of, but for a more realistic theory, people believe that Lilo is actually coping with the death of her parents, but in the form of having an imaginary friend named Stitch. It also kind of adds up when you think about the CIA trying to take Stitch away from Lilo, like at the end of the movie. It kind of makes sense for Lilo to have this fear and this narrative be there because she experienced that as a child. She had her parents taken away from her way too young. So it's definitely a possibility that she kind of came up with the entire alien subplot as a response to the trauma of her parents' death. I mean, we see Lilo having quite the imagination in general. She talks to photos of her parents, she feeds fish because she thinks that they control the weather, and she just doesn't have like a normal like social life for a child. She is seen to have no friends, so it kind of makes sense that she would come up with an imaginary friend who would always be there for her and could protect her. I mean, Lilo has the textbook signs of a child struggling with grief, PTSD, emotional neglect, and attachment issues. And then right as everything is falling apart, a magical friend appears who protects her and understands her, and he needs her as much as she needs him, which I think is very important. And this theory goes kind of dark when you think about all of the stuff that Stitch destroys when he's first introduced. He trashes the house, he bites people, breaks the rules. He's just obviously chaotic. So it's theorized that Lilo's actually the one who's doing these things and then like in her head blaming it on her imaginary friend. So she's the one that's trashing the house because that's how she expresses her anger. But she's not taking accountability because she's saying it wasn't my imaginary friend, it was Stitch. So the things that Stitch does is everything that Lilo wants to do but feels like she can't. And if you think about it, this kind of makes sense. Like she literally like attacked Myrtle, even though Myrtle's a little bitch. That still happened. Like she's definitely going through it. In this theory, Stitch is Lilo's emotional aid. He's not just her friend, he's her outlet. Like how she's expressing herself, everything that she's doing to express her anger and emotions gets blamed on Stitch, but really, Stitch isn't real. I actually think this theory makes a lot of sense because a lot of times people will play into a kid's imaginary world and imagination in general. So it would make sense why the people around Lilo act like Stitch is really there. Maybe Stitch is even a stuffed animal that she has like brought to life in her own head. And I think it's interesting because as Stitch becomes more of a part of Lilo's life and things become more chaotic and Stitch begins to act out by burning shit down and wrecking everything and biting people, it's really Lilo that's doing all of that. That's why the whole CIA plot of them trying to take Stitch away from them is kind of because like Nani and the other people around Lilo are like, you can't keep blaming Stitch, who doesn't exist, on the things that you're doing. Like, let's take Stitch away. Like at some point, I think a lot of people try to get their kids to let go of their imaginary friends. So maybe that represents that time in Lilo's life. So maybe that subplot trying to get Stitch away from Lilo is really the people around Lilo trying to get her to let go of this imaginary friend that was clearly self-destructive. I mean, if you think about it, Stitch completely like mirrors Lilo in every way. It makes complete sense why he would be an imaginary friend. They're both loners and outcasts and different, and the whole story is about learning to be loved even when you're broken, and all of it just makes so much damn sense when you think about it in this perspective. But it's sad and it's like childhood ruining for sure. I think that this theory is true, and I just saw the Lilo and Stitch like live action movie, and knowing this theory, I think it makes a lot of freaking sense because why did so many people like not really react to the fact that Stitch is there? Like I get it, it's a children's movie, it's not supposed to be thought so deeply of, but naturally we're conspiracy theorists. We're gonna think things on a deeper level, and I think it makes complete sense to think that Stitch is actually Lilo's imaginary friend. Complete sense. Like I 100% believe in this theory. Anyway, I want to hear what you guys think of all of these theories, but that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Like I said, in the comments below, let me know what you think of these theories, and let me know any childhood TV shows, like your favorite TV shows or movies that you want me to look into the conspiracy theories behind for the next video. Let me know. But that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.